Okay, great. So let me just quickly kickstart this circle with giving some context. So we've been reading the book Skin, Knees, and ABCs, The Complex World of Schools. And right now we're on part 3, which is actually the operational dimensions, which is why the chapter number 6 is actually called The Psychology of Control and Conformity. And I think in this chapter, Devashetan, you specifically go into explaining the psychological concepts of control and conformity, but I think more importantly, explain about how it's an element of the school system as well, which is derived from this colonial history of like the purpose of education itself. So I thought that maybe we could kick off this conversation with you, Debashi, talking a little bit about the idea of control and conformity and what role it actually plays in the education system currently, and what this like factory model of education is and why currently it's a core part of our education system. And then maybe after that we can talk a little bit about how to break out of this sense of control and conformity that doesn't really work as well in this system. So why don't you start off with just talking a little bit about control and conformity in the context of the school system?
Okay, am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Uh, Schools, as we experience them now, in countries like India, were actually conceived during the Industrial Revolution in the late 18th century. So there was a need for trained manpower during those days to work in the factories, and the primary objective of schools were to provide the factories with such manpower. In order to do that, schools themselves turned into factories, producing educated manpower through an assembly line model where children pass from year to year in classes and emerge as finished products of school system. There was no individual attention, and the system was designed to mass produce educated workforce. Since the condition of such schools were terrible, the children had to be controlled through a system of harsh punishments. Charles Dickens had written about these institutions in many of his books of that time, so much so that these schools are still termed as Dickensian. When the colonies emerged, the colonizers needed a section of the indigenous population to work for them. So the schools that were set up during the British rule in India had that as an objective. In fact, Thomas Macaulay in 1835 had written a document titled Minutes on Indian Education, where he had specified this as the aim of the colonial education model that was to be set up in India. The result was what is known as in social sciences as acculturation. Acculturation is where students forgot their own culture and embraced the foreign colonial culture as their own. And the problem was magnified when religious orders, with their own rigid dogmas, started running a plethora of educational institutions in the country, thus adding the fear of heaven and hell to the already complex soup of punishments and rewards that were being used to govern schools. The essential objective of schools has unfortunately, most schools have unfortunately remained the same as of today, especially in post colonial societies like India. And it has remained the same as maybe during the industrial revolution and the colonies. So instead of factories per se, you have a plethora of institutions like IT sector companies, or say FMCG companies, etc., who have been added to the list uh, of factories, along with the factories, while the basic requirements of conformity and obedience have remained essentially the same. Now, the operational problem here lies in the fact that school authorities fear that students and teachers will go out of control. This is mostly because there are a handful of school administrators, but a relatively large number of teachers and students. So the schools began to be run as de facto military units with strict discipline, and there were obedience loaded, control driven, hierarchical, mechanical systems. This helped in ensuring that these systems did not collapse into chaos. Since we had discussed earlier, complex systems have to maintain that fine balance of order and disorder within them. However, it led to a general level of dysfunctionality by stifling thoughts, opinions, promoting a culture of fear, discouraging questions, essentially snapping the feedback loop that is so essential in complex systems. Moreover, such control and conformity dominated cultures promote mediocrity and punish merit. I know of many schools. It's a personal experience where who reject very good teachers because they feel they would be difficult to control. I have had principals tell me that 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 lady would be very good in that position, but she'll be very difficult to control, and the lady does not get a job. Many brilliant students have their lives destroyed because they dared to question the system. So this culture of control and conformity has resulted in very mediocre school administration too, because mediocrity, rudeness, and mediocrity can hide, look of uh, discipline and strict rules and rudeness. I have a story to recall from in working with schools. This is from 2004. I was asked to visit the principal of a school near my hometown in Siliguri at 1 p.m. After lunch. I was there at 1 p.m., but I was made to wait till say about 3 p.m. outside the principal's office, and all the while I could see the principal in her office, not too busy at all, just making me sit there. Anyway, as I sat there, I saw a man with half his face in a bandage and the other half swollen, and he approached school staff and told her that his family had just had an accident a few hours ago, and his wife was seriously hurt and was in hospital, and he would like to take his child to see her mother before the school times end. Now, this staff entered the principal's office and returned with a no. We cannot let the child go because school rules are that one has to give 3 days of prior notice if one wishes to take a child home early. Now, how was this man to know 3 days beforehand that he was going to have an accident that day? Anyway, so she ended this conversation with the legend that we hear very often in schools: rules are rules. While certain amount of control might be necessary to keep a complex system in balance, schools have begun to prioritize control and conformity over all other processes, and that is a serious problem, and especially in post-colonial societies like India. What's more is that because students are not allowed to question authority, rules are often applied arbitrarily and in very inegalitarian ways. Some rules apply to some set of students while it doesn't to others. We've seen this in our own school when we were in school, Anurag and I. The threat of retribution for misdemeanors hang thick. So we had one legendary teacher, again Anurag will remember him, who used to scream, you fool with me and I'll fool with your marks. It sounded uh, okay. Then it's only now, after having spent 2 decades with children, that I now understand how skewed and dangerous and unteacher like that statement was. So, if you have to threaten students with not scoring their tests fairly if they misbehave in your class, you'll never be respected by them. They'll make jokes about you on your behind your back. This is exactly the problem with control and conformity. You can't fully control human reactions and behavior, and such attempts lead to undesired outcomes. With this control and conformity, there'll be some who will leave school bitter and cynical, and while others will, develop problems of confidence and will never be able to question norms, which is what conformist societies want, or even take their own decisions in life. Still, others might rebel in functional ways. I'd like to think I'm doing that, or others in very dysfunctional ways. You would have juvenile delinquency, suicides, depression, many such problems. Um, Most importantly, and I'm saying this with a certain amount of responsibility, control and conformity driven systems where people are conditioned to blindly follow authorities and never question them breed unmentionable vices, depravity, and injustice. especially among those that are weak and who the system is pretending to help. Hello, Anushka?
Hello? Yes, yes, yes. Sorry, I was just making sure that you had finished your point there, Barshi. I think that's like a very poignant note in which you kind of like left it on. And I know that when even I was reading this chapter about like control and conformity, I think all of us have like examples and think of situations about how the school system has come to really like embody this level of control that is not just to keep the class in order, but rather to kind of like create a situation in which it's easier for teachers to just kind of like get through the syllabus, right? And it almost like feeds into what kind of citizens we're actually creating in our society as well, right? And I think that's a very important point to make. But I also do think that in your book, you also went on to kind of explain certain education philosophers who've talked a little bit about like what's the alternative, right? And I feel like it's an important conversation to say that yes, schools right now have control and conformity as their core, but how do we move and what does it shift towards? So could you talk a little bit about like Freire's thoughts, right? About like what does it therefore move to and how do you move out of it? Because like you said, school systems want to maintain this kind of like order. So what's the alternative?
Um, I think Anand has asked a question. Anand was asking whether this system makes students hierarchical driven later on in life. Exactly, that is what I think the system, colonial systems and post-colonial systems want, and you hit the nail on the head. One of the foremost names that comes to mind among educational thinkers who had spoken out against this control-driven system is that of the Brazilian thinker and educationist Paulo Freire. And his book Pedagogy of the Oppressed is a milestone in writing on education and liberal thoughts. It has been translated in 18 languages, and many totalitarian states, including the apartheid South Africa and several Latin American countries, had banned it. It was also banned, curiously, in Tucson, Arizona, because they said he was trying to entice people into rebellion against the American state. Uh, but Freire taught at Harvard for a long time, after having been exiled from Brazil. He was also jailed in Brazil because the government felt his thoughts were revolutionary and ignorant in nature. So the pedagogy of the oppressed is dedicated to the oppressed and those who suffer and with them and fight by their side. Freire had described the current education system as a banking system, as a banking system where students' brains are taken as empty piggy banks to be filled with whatever the teacher uses. This is the same philosophy which, if you read John Locke and his philosophy of tabula rasa, or an empty slate. So he had said the best knowledge is co-created by the teacher and the student. Thus, his system was called dialogics, where the teacher would share a part of his or her power with the students, and resulting in a system that promoted cooperation and unity over manipulation and control. Uh, Ivan Illich was a Catholic priest before he left the order and became its very staunch critic, once describing it as a business organization. He had written very influential papers with very provocative titles, but his book Deschooling Society is taken to be a very influential book, which actually in the 70s had envisaged a society where learning was not restricted to school, and a network for learning, uh, which we are witnessing now, after 51 years, through the internet and through all the learning sites, would represent institutionalized learning and thinking. That's what he had said 51 years ago, and that would deinstitutionalize society. That was his thought. And in recent years, I think there's an American teacher and an educationist who has John Taylor Gatto, who has written and spoken extensively about the current system of education. And I think his book, I would recommend that as a reading for anybody interested in school education. Dumbing Us Down: The Hidden Curriculum of Compulsory Schooling. It has dwelled extensively on the evils of the factory system of education and basically what is described as the idiocy of standardized examinations. Gatto in that book, he calls schools psychopathic institutions, which provide something called provisional self-esteem. Provisional self-esteem is a situation where your self-esteem is provisional, and you are like, it is a self-esteem which has been vetted by an adult, most often by teachers. So if a child thinks he or she is relatively good in maths, she is not supposed to feel good about it until a teacher examines her work and decides whether she is justified in feeling good about her work. That's the way schools run. And Gatto has spoken extensively about it. So I think these three main philosophers of modern times have spoken out against the factory system of education, and they need to be read.
And Debarshi, all of these education philosophers, right, have really like proposed different ways of like looking at education. Have you seen any examples of schools that really embody their philosophy? So, for example, in Frere, when you're talking about this like dialogics, right, is there a particular class size that enables you to have these conversations? That is more of a dialogue, right? Co-creating knowledge. So, are there any examples? Maybe you could
No,
talk a little bit.
this is the class size does not, this is a common misconception. When it comes to dialogics, class sizes do not matter. I follow a Harvard Law School professor whose classes consist of say 3, 4, 500 students in a hall, and he uses dialogics there. And you might say that's for a little more matured intelligent audience. The same system can be reproduced in a class, um, in a school class of 50 or 60 students. It isn't a problem with the class size. uh, what the problem is that when you have a dialogue based uh, module, it takes a longer time to finish the curriculum. It takes a longer time, and that time at is not available made available to teachers under the current scenario. So they might so the when a teacher enters the class at the beginning of the term, the teacher is planning a way to finish the syllabus by the end of the term, even if it means rushing through some points. So that actually creates a problem. That actually creates the main problem in having dialogics. But having said that, it is not that teachers don't use it at all. Teachers do use it, uh, however sparse. If you ask me if I have come across a school using this, I'll give you a frank answer: no. No, I have not had the good fortune. But there's only a limited number of schools that I have seen in my life. I'm sure there are schools now, the new schools are using parts of this.
Okay. So,
Uh,
and I think the other aspect is the fact that the teachers are also part of this larger system of control, and they're given a syllabus, they have a limited amount of time and they have to finish it. So there's like
that is
multiple
one.
like nested systems.
Yeah, that is one. And the other part of that is where the Milgram's experiment comes, where the teacher is a part of a system and has to behave as the system. And the teacher is conditioned to behave in a manner that the system conditions him or her to behave in order to remain a part of the system. Which is this is an aspect that I kind of hit in the book. One is of course the operational problem of finishing a syllabi and everything else. The other problem is this, that if you have a school culture that promotes dialogics, that is liberal, that kind of abhors control and conformity, the teacher will behave that way. and vice versa.
So it's a larger shift that needs to be at every level. And also at a board level, right? So it's not only about school management, but it is about like the education ministry or the people who are doing the syllabi who have to kind of like have a
Correct.
change at every level.
Very
Therefore,
true. Very true. Very true. And that would really require a fundamental rethink about what we want from schools and how we want society to develop. And that is where there'll be vested interests and there'll be pull and push in opposite directions, and that's why these changes are so difficult to bring about at the school level.
Anurag, any thoughts or anyone from the listeners as well?
So my thought is one of frustration, right? Saying, I mean, the system, the school system, right, more than anything else, right, has an auto, authority component, right? As in, these are teachers, these are much more older than you. You are, as a student, you're highly influenceable, right? And the teachers hold so much control over your outcomes in some way or the other, right? And even if you could take away all the visual elements of control, right? Like, for instance, she would again empathize with me, right? I mean, we used to get punished in school simply because our laces were open, right? So all those visual elements of your dress and your ties and your assembly line and your theater sitting in a room and everything. How do you take away the aspect of authority, right? Because that's just how the system is, right? In some ways, and one can imagine how that system can dilute at a college level, at a higher education level, where there is some level of adult talking to adult, right? But here, forever, right, it will be an adult child relationship. And so even if you transform systems from an outer point of view, I think the inherent heuristic of authority will keep coming into play some way or the other, right?
Correct. Actually, how I describe this is an asymmetric power equation, and that asymmetric power equation will stay. One way that the government had tried doing it in India was through the RTE, which I still hail as a path-breaking legislation. It really empowered the child, but again, vested interests came into fore, and basically it was never thoroughly implemented. um, Schools do not want to share that power with students oblique parents, and that is a fundamental problem in post-colonial societies. It is not so much in non-post-colonial societies, mainly in say mainland Europe, where students are empowered to a large extent. But as you said, the control and conformity comes in very many ways, and there is always that tacit power breathing down your neck, even if there is a smile on the face. So Anurag is very right, and it is frustrating because I don't see this improving in a in a while,
And just one
in
more
India at
sentence,
least.
that when you have such kind of systems, right, where there is high level of order, right, it also means that it will breed some level of inequality, right? And Devash, I fully empathize with you, right? I mean, our school system